Hey everyone, this is Holly Robinson, and this is the first part of our very last unit. I know you're excited, and this is our ecology unit, so here we go. Now, first, we need to look at the definition for ecology, and ecology is kind of a different sort of science. It's really kind of holistic almost, and it's really the science concerned with the interactions of living organisms with each other and within their environment. Okay, so ecology tends to look at really a broad picture of kind of the health of the environment. And it's also known as a branch of biology that deals with distribution, interactions of living organisms at the community level and also at the population and ecosystem level, and also, on a whole global scale. And then last, ecology is actually a branch of sociology which deals with how humans interact with their social and physical environment. Okay, it's also known as human ecology. Now, here are just some basic definitions of ecology that you can read. We'll kind of use these sort of as kind of the basis for our talk for the next few minutes. Ecology is just the study of organisms and their interactions within the physical environment and with each other. A population is really kind of like a population of people or a population of squirrels in a forest or in the woods. It's really all the members of the same species that inhabit a particular area. Okay, so it's the same species, that means population. A community that's all the populations found in a particular area. So that would be like the population of squirrels and humans and snakes and rabbits and all the living things found in a certain area, whether it be like a town or a neighborhood or a yard. Anything like that can be considered really a community. Now, an ecosystem, that's a community and its physical environment, and that includes the non-living or abiotic characteristics and also the living or biotic, characteristics. And then a biosphere, that's all the ecosystems on Earth, including those living communities. Now, just to show you some organization here, here we have an individual fish, and then like a school of the same species of fish, that would be like a population. And then if you have a community, for instance, if you've got schools of fish and you've got sea anemones and you've got coral, that would be like a community. You have different species, but they're all living in the same area. That's a community. And then an ecosystem, that's all the community and then the physical environment too, and that includes non-living and living, components. Now, just so you know, for the final, population genetics, that's just like what it sounds like. Population genetics just studies the diversity of populations at the genetic level. Okay, so that is going to be on your final, so just keep that in mind. Ecologists really tend to study populations really at a much larger scale, not necessarily at the genetic level or the molecular level. Ecologists tend to look at the big, broad picture of what's going on in the environment and all the things that are living in it. And populations are constantly changing in response to different things, such as seasons, changes in the environment, things like global warming, or if the Earth is cooling. Okay. Natural disasters, things like hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, and then also competition for resources between and within certain species, like competition for food or competition for space to live. Okay. For instance, these woolly mammoths that are on the left's pictures, A, B, and C, climate change and human hunting basically made the woolly mammoths go extinct about 10,000 years ago. Okay, so basically they were just hunted to death. Okay, and then also climate change, okay, made it to where the woolly mammoths eventually went extinct. And then on the right side, you have Asian carp. Okay, and Asian carp, they've disrupted the ecological community structure. And you might not know this, but in the early 1970s, several species of Asian carp were imported into Arkansas for biocontrol of algae blooms in kind of aquaculture facilities. Okay, and basically these Asian carp were just brought in to deal with and eat the algae. Okay. Now, these Asian carp escaped into the middle and lower Mississippi drainage units, and as a result, they've spread all over the Mississippi River system. Okay. And the thing with Asian carp, they can grow up to 4 feet long, they can get up to 100 pounds, and they can live up to 30 years old. Okay. And they also reduce the population of mussels and other, you know, life like big mouth buffalo. Okay. They foul up the nets of commercial fishermen. They're kind of a pest fish, and to be honest, a lot of Americans really don't like to eat them. They've actually been farmed in China for many, many years, but over here in America, we typically don't eat them the way we eat like catfish and crappie, okay, and all that, and trout. Okay, so Asian carp, basically, they've just multiplied all over the Mississippi River system, and they've reduced the populations of other living organisms in, the river. Now, population size, that's just the total number of individuals. You have population density, which is the number of individuals per unit of area. And this exponential growth model, that just shows accelerating growth where resources are not limited. Okay, so if you have nothing go wrong and you have organisms that are just reproducing like crazy, then you'll see an exponential growth model. And basically, you can go from a number of about 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 32, 64, 128, and so forth. Okay, and you can see exponential models like on bacteria, they multiply like crazy. And then over many, many years, humans have done the same thing. Now, logistic growth model, okay, that shows the reality of kind of limited resources. I'm sorry that cut off right there, but should be the reality of limited resources. Now, the carrying capacity, that's the maximum number of individuals of a population that can be supported by the resources of a habitat. Carrying capacity has a lot to do with like how many animals you can shoot during, let's say, deer season or duck season. Basically, if they're over the carrying capacity, that will determine, how many you can hunt and kill, for instance. And if you look here, the population of like yeast and seals, population size will exceed the carrying capacity for short periods of time, and then it actually will fall below that carrying capacity. Okay, so it'll extend up over carrying capacity, but then due to the lack of resources, let's say food or shelter, then the number will fall back below. Okay, and it kind of regulates itself. Now, we've had population growth over the last few years. The Earth's population has continued to get bigger and bigger. For one thing, we're living a lot longer. Humans are always constantly expanding territory and finding new places to live. We have better nutrition. Our health care is better. Okay, so those are just some of the reasons that the population of the Earth has continued to grow. Now, the regulation of population growth in a community, there are some density independent factors that happen no matter how many organisms are in an area. Things like weather, natural disasters like earthquakes, tornadoes, tsunamis. Okay, that'll kill all the members of a population, whether you have a small population or a big population. Okay, so abiotic factors, that's basically has a lot to do with where things are, whether it's the beach or whether it's on land or on an island, places like that. Density dependent factors, those are biotic factors, things like food availability, competition for other resources, diseases, okay, and that is dependent on the size of a population. Now, competition, that's a density dependent factor, and that occurs when members of two different species try to have the same resource, whether it's food or shelter, stuff like that. And an ecological niche, that's the role an organism plays in the community, and that includes where they are in the food chain, the resources that they use, the interactions they have with other organisms, where they live, things like that. Now, competition, there's a competitive exclusion principle, and that just means that no two species can occupy the same ecological niche if resources are limited. Basically, they will kill each other. For instance, if you took two parameciums, like two species, and you grew them in the same test tube with limited resources, only one species of paramecium would survive. Okay, and basically, they would kill off the other, or they would eat the other. Okay. And then resource partitioning, those are just kind of differences in the way a resource is going to be used. Okay, and it decreases competition between the two species and allows the two species to have different niches and therefore survive. So basically, if you took paramecium and then separated them in a test tube or in a flask, and if one fed on bacteria like at the bottom of the tube and one fed up at the top of the tube, they would survive because they would just stay away from each other. Now, community ecology, basically populations of one species never live in isolation from other species. Okay, and they tend to form an ecological community. Basically, all organisms are dependent on each other, okay, in some kind of way. Okay. And the number of species occupying that same habitat and the relative abundance, that's known as just diversity. Okay. Now, predation. Predation is just when one organism eats another. That's all it is. It's real simple. And predator-prey population dynamics, basically as one goes up, okay, like the more prey you have, then the more predators you have. And the reason is just because the more food that's available, then the more that the other population, the predator, can reproduce. Okay, so basically they just cycle back and forth. Okay, so predator numbers also decrease when there's less food, or they increase when there's more food. And if you look here, this snowshoe hare is being chased by a lynx here. And if you look at these numbers, basically you can see that as the hare populations have gone up, then the lynx populations have also gone up, and vice versa. As the hare populations have gone down, then the lynx populations also tend to decrease over time as well.